Chris Eubank Jr. challenges for a version of the world title, but who's watching? I am Teekosey, and this is with just 15 defeats. Hello fight fans around the world, it's Teekosey here and I'm back for another round of with just 15 defeats. Now today we're going to switch it up somewhat differently. If you've been a subscriber or follower of my channel for any period of time, you know that I focus in on the heavyweight division. That's my thing. But for 2017 I'm decided to add to that, bring some more flavors to the channel and discuss some fights that I believe have a bearing on the sport of boxing as a whole, or involve fighters that I find intriguing, interesting, or I actually just genuinely like. So today we're going to be discussing Chris Eubank Jr. versus Renold Quinlan, and I will discuss why it ticks those boxes in a second. Now, as I say, if you've got any comments on this fight, this event, I want to hear from you. I want to start the debate. Okay, I want to get involved. I want to get involved with you. So hit me up on the comments section. If you like the video, remember to click the like button. And if you want to hear anything more from me, you need to go ahead to my channel and click the big subscribe button. Be much appreciated. So, Chris Eubank Jr. versus Quinlan. As I say, I'm going to be discussing fights that have a bearing on the sport as a whole. Now, the reason why this ticks that box is because this fight, regardless of whether you think the matchup is any good, it is being shown live on pay-per-view in the UK via a free-to-air terrestrial channel. Now, if you're from the UK, you live in the UK, we have, over the years, sport and pay-to-see sport has flicked between many channels. Many channels have come and gone. Okay, so for the last few years, if you've been watching boxing in the UK, you've watched it on either free-to-air Channel 5, okay? So in the UK, we have free-to-air channels, and then we have some additional channels, okay? And then we have paid channels, okay? And what we call in the UK terrestrial is basically 5 simple channels. And they've been around for a long time. And then the other channels that we get through the airways, even if they are free, have kind of come along in the last 20 or so years. So as I say, if you watch boxing, you would have watched it on Channel 5, okay? In the last few years, we've seen some Chris Eubank fights, we've seen Tyson fights, not really big fights, but we've seen some fights, okay? You would have seen it on Sky Sports. That was predominantly the main source of boxing in the UK. It's a paid channel with a monthly subscription, and it has all types of sports, okay? We then, in the last couple of years, we've seen Box Nation, Frank Warren's channel, which popped along. Again, a monthly subscription, 100% boxing, and for me personally, I think it's been a massive disappointment. They've tried to bring boxing out there, but I think the whole evolution of Frank Warren from being a major promoter to really concentrating on a channel left him short of big fights. Whether people agree with it, that's kind of what happened. And over the years, they've supported the channel as a whole with only a handful of kind of biggish events. Now, in the last couple of months, we've seen David Haye also fight on a comedy channel, be that what it is. But in terms of any other channels, we haven't really seen much of anything. I think Carl Frampton fought on ITV last year. But anyway, okay, so what's happened is that ITV, which is one of the main channels in the UK for family entertainment, previously did show boxing up until about 7 or 8 years ago. I think one of their last fights was Carl Froch Carl Froch against crikey, I can see him. I can't think of his name, but it was it was one of Carl Froch's absolute wars. He won it. Really exciting fight. I can't remember the opponent off the top of my brain, but anyway, so ITV have decided that they're going to put out pay-per-view, and this is going to be their first event. Now, I've heard some mixed opinions on this. It's a shame that they've kind of gone with such a low-profile fight, but they've gone with it, and that's why it kind of ticks that box. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes, because we all want to see more boxing. We all want to see more coverage of boxing, and if it gets more coverage on what I describe as the terrestrial channels, it's more likely to help build the sport as a whole. Okay, but anyway, let's move forward and talk about the actual fight. Chris Eubank Jr. We know him. We know his father. He's an interesting character. One of the reasons why I like him is because he is interesting. He brings something else to the party. So does his father. We want interesting characters in sport. We don't just want people that can achieve and do things. From my opinion, I want to see people that really create a debate in and out of the ring for good reasons. Okay. Now we've seen it in the UFC. Conor McGregor, in my opinion, has made his way to the very, very top of it through his personality and what he's done outside of the ring. And that might be controversial for some people, but if you look at his resume prior to the title fight that he had, where he stopped the Brazilian guy in a matter of seconds, I can't think of the name now either, but his resume wasn't that impressive, in my opinion. Okay, he talked his way to title fights ahead of some other guys, and now he's kind of backed it up with some big victories since, but he got there based on who he wanted to portray. So we need more and more people like that in all realms of sport. I believe Eubank has that. Now in the ring, again, he's an interesting guy. He's shredded. He is very, very lean, very, very lean, and for this fight, he's moving up in weight. He's moving up from middleweight to super middleweight. Now, for me, that's not a problem. It's not a problem whatsoever. Now, on my channel, I have a video where I discuss moving up in weight, talking about the weight classes, and I've gone to great depth discussing how people dramatically moved up in weight with no problem. And realistically, my opinion is that it's only really a problem if you're small for the weight already. If you're small for a current weight and then you try and move up, that's a problem. But when you're Chris Eubank Jr. and you're about 6 foot, you're incredibly lean. You can pack more weight on for your size, and he could probably move up to light heavy without an issue. Now in the ring, as I say, he's quite purposeful. Some would say a poser, and he wants everything to be kind of quite visual. Everything's quite elaborate, very over the top in everything he does, which again makes him quite an interesting guy. Now, what that does leave is to weaknesses. He leaves himself quite open because he is trying to pull these poses and quite exaggerated movements. Now, what he does have is he does have speed. He has a good jab, okay, and he's a warrior. I think most people can agree that because of the weaknesses he does has, he takes shots. He keeps going. We've seen that in a lot of these fights. Some of his more difficult fights, he took some punishment. He's kept going. He's kept going. Admittedly, his CV is not phenomenal, but he has kept going. The Billy Joe Saunders fight was a fantastic fight. If you have not seen it, you'll come into this and you really know a limited amount about Chris Eubank Jr. Go and check the Billy Joe Saunders fight. Now, he lost that, but it was somewhat close. Both fighters had good periods of the fight, and Chris Eubank Jr.'s probably lack of skill let him down. but his tank and his heart and his warrior instincts kept him in that fight. Okay, for me, I've always thought this since the first fight, his debut fight. I think he lacks genuine power. Now, obviously, when you've got speed and precision, sometimes you don't necessarily need that concussive one punch power. But I think he does lack the one punch power. We saw that against Nick Blackwell, which has since gone on to kind of real terrible kind of repercussions for Nick Blackwell. But Chris Eubank Jr. was able to land punch after punch after punch, devastating, full range of motion punches, uppercuts, and really was cracking the head back of Nick Blackwell over and over and over again. And maybe if Eubank Jr. had more concussive power, and he would have knocked him out quite early on, and Nick Blackwell would still be a professional boxer now. He would have got over. But because he continually took punch after punch after punch, it's been unfortunate for the lad. But anyway, let's move across to Quinlan. Now, this is the opponent. The opponent for Chris Eubank Jr. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know a great deal about him. I've watched some of his fights, and I've assessed them to create this opinion for you guys that possibly will have never heard of him. Now, he's from Australia, and he's been a professional for about 9 years. Professional for 9 years, but he has a record of, it's a very limited record. It's 11-1. So 11-1 in 9 years. Okay, he's been a professional for about 4 years longer than Eubank Jr. Whereas Eubank Jr. has a record of 23-1. Now, looking at his record, he's had 2 very large layoffs. It would appear that he made his debut, then he was absent from the professional game for over 2 years. He came back, and then he had another layoff for another 2 years. So in the first 5 years of professional boxing, he had 4 fights. Now, we know when you're a young, hungry boxer coming through, realistically, in the first 5 years, I think you should have had at least 22 fights. We're kind of like in a position where Eubank Jr. is. We've seen many people become genuine world champions within 5 years. Okay, so I'm not quite sure. I haven't been able to find out the reason why these layoffs occur. Could be injuries, could be all kinds of things. Okay, he also has a very limited amateur background, so his amateur record, he only had about 15 amateur fights. So whilst he's been in the game for over a decade, he doesn't really have much fight experience. And for me, in the fights that I've seen him, it's clear to be seen. Okay, obviously over time he has improved, but initially he's going to be a slightly smaller man. Despite the fact that Chris Eubank is moving up in weight, Chris Eubank Jr. will be the bigger man, and he will visibly look the bigger man in the ring. That's what I would immediately say. Okay, I think that Quinlan's abilities are somewhat basic. He may have some physical attributes. His punching looks fairly quick, and he works off a jab, but he is very, very static. His feet are quite immobile. He needs to have his feet planted to throw the jab, but he intersperses that with periods of all-out action. Okay, where he will really swing for the fences and try and create an attack. Okay, a sustained attack on his opponent and hope to stop them. And as I say, he has a record of 11-1, where he fought another fairly inexperienced young fighter, and he lost on points, went the distance, and he lost on points. Now, as I say, I think from what I've seen, this guy has a bit of a warrior instinct himself. As I say, he's limited. From what I've seen, he leaves himself open, and the famous Eubank Jr. uppercut, I think, has a place play in this fight. I think that Quinlan will be open. He'll be open to the uppercut and also to the overhand right. He'll leave himself open to both punches. And realistically, I'm not necessarily saying that Chris Eubank Jr. will stop him, but I think he will hurt him. And if Chris Eubank Jr. plays to his own strengths, his natural athleticism, his movement, both body and footwork, darting in and out, he shouldn't really have a problem with this guy. He should be able to win this very, very dominantly, and possibly get the stoppage. That's my opinion. Now, another contentious point is that this is for what is being described as a world title, IBO, and Chris Eubank Jr. has tried to market this as being a big world title fight. He's going to finally get a world title fight. I've seen him saying that loads of top guys in the past have held versions of IBO world titles and blah blah blah. But in this day and age, it's not seen. It's not seen as a genuine world title. Now, the problem with world titles and being a world champion is that there are so many in this day and age. We have the four main organising bodies, okay? WBO, WBA, WBC, and the IBF. They are recognised as the main, and there are world titles of each of them. Now, what has made the whole boxing scene crazy, and something that many people tell me is one of the reasons why they don't have the time for boxing, or it leaves them a bitter taste in the mouth, is that there are so many world champions for every sport. I know particularly my brother is one of these guys where he thinks, like, how can there possibly be like 6 world champions of one sport, or even more when we've got interim champions, we've got regular, super. There's so many just of this same weight. It's become silly. Now, this is an organising body that is seen even further down the pecking order. So to win this and kind of classify yourself as a world champion, I think is wrong. And I don't think he's really going to get any respect from it until he fights one of the main guys. Now, last year there was all this talk about him possibly fighting GGG, Triple G. It never happened, and then Triple G ended up fighting Kell Brook in a somewhat interesting fight. He needs to fight someone decent. Personally, I would have loved to have seen Eubank Jr. in a rematch with Billy Joe Saunders. Whether Billy Joe Saunders will also move up in weight, I don't think he will. I think he's middleweight. I don't think he's capable of getting up to super middleweight. But I would have liked to have seen that rematch because it was an exciting fight. And I think the fact that Eubank Jr. is really trying to take his career to the next level, it would have been good to kind of revenge that if possible. Now, Billy Joe Saunders is no mug. He's someone that I really, really rate. Out of the 3 guys that turned pro in Britain at that time, Billy Joe Saunders, DeGale and Frankie Gavin, my immediate reaction was that Billy Joe Saunders was going to be the most successful. But there you go. But here we go. So I just thought I'd put together this video about the Chris Eubank fight. I've waffled on a lot. Probably not many people would have got this far, particularly as the waffle was right at the beginning. But if you have done, I really appreciate you, and I really want to hear your comments below. Does Quinlan stand a chance at all? Okay, will he get stopped earlier? Will he actually knock out Chris Eubank Jr.? Okay, will Chris Eubank Jr. be exposed at super middleweight? Is this whole event as a pay-per-view warranted? Does ITV pay-per-view as a channel, does it have a future? Let's hear from you. I've been Teekosey, and this has been with just 15 defeats.